I'm happy to be here. In October 9th, I turned 97. I can look back and remember things that amaze me. I was only 8 when she passed, so I don't remember the details of what was going on and didn't understand just what transpired there. At 8 years old, you find out things have changed for your life. The most important person in your world is no longer available, and that's difficult to deal with. As a matter of fact, I think I gave it a name ultimately, PTSD. I think people like me sometimes have that condition that they're dealing with because you don't have the support that you just felt was going to be yours forever. Yes, she was in high school and had to discontinue to maintain the family. Amazingly, there were 4 brothers and 3 sisters. So Jessie was the oldest of the sisters. And she took very, very good care of us under the difficult situation that she inherited. But that's the way it goes. We had a house. Fortunately, he had purchased the house, and we had a place that could call home and did. And we stuck together. It was an important part of it. We all pretty much relied on each other and tried not to cause problems for the rest of us. It was an immigrant, and he, for some reason, never developed the use of the English language sufficiently to make it easy for him and the rest of us. He operated under those conditions, and we wound up having to suffer the consequences because he wasn't getting the mileage out of life that he was entitled to. Language thing impacted me. I couldn't converse easily with my father, and he couldn't talk to me about things. Rarely did. So unfortunately, here I was in a situation where no mother and no father. Oh, yes, the whole community stuck together. They'd get together, discuss issues, keeping up with things. It was just a difficult time for all of them. And us as well. You recognize what a damaging condition that is going to prevail. And it sure did. They wiped us out in a hurry. Had the strength, did not possess. Fortunately, there were some survivors. My leaving high school occurred because of my wish to go into the service. I was conscious of the fact that my 4 older brothers were in there, and I knew that it wasn't too long before that conflict would be over, and I didn't want to miss being part of history. That was part of the impetus. At the same time, I was having a difficult time in our local community because I tried to stay in school, and then at about 3:30, I had to walk a mile to a wire producer and work a full shift. I didn't get out of there until about 11:30, and then get home, walk about a mile, and just had to do it that way. And it was wearing the heck out of me. There's no question about it. It was difficult. Thoughts of the military kept popping up. And when I'm ready, I'm going to do it. I didn't have to wait long before I was eligible to do it. They lowered the enlistment rate to 17, and I says, I'm gone. And I did, To radar school, learn how to operate radar equipment on a ship. At that time, it wasn't that big a job because they were just introducing that mechanism to us, so a lot of us had no previous idea. LSD-25, landing ship dock from Philadelphia. What happened was that the ship was christened. It was built in Philadelphia Navy Yard, which no longer exists. And then they provided the crew for it. We came up on board when the christening was taking place. And the next thing you know, we're taking off from Philadelphia down to Norfolk, and before long from Norfolk down through the Panama Canal. When we went through it, entered through the eastern direction, and that part was largely like the jungle. You could hear the animals making a noise, entertaining to tune into that. As we got to the other side, we went through the Panama Canal into the Pacific. They kept you busy when you went with the flow. You had a job to do, and you expect to carry it out, and we did. We had a chance to go ashore one night in Panama City, and then right back on board. Everybody was close, good camaraderie, especially in our N division, navigation division, and we stopped at any port. So you'd have 2 or 3 guys that go with you. We were originally headed out for Hawaii, Oahu, but had to divert to San Diego for repairs. The LSD is designed to, they have what they call a well deck, which was a ability to make the ship sit lower in the water, drop the tailgate, and then those smaller boats could drive right onto the boat, onto our ship. We'd have 20 smaller boats to deliver someplace where some need existed. The ship was pretty big. You had activities going all over the place there, so you weren't in on everything. Yeah. Things were happening, and you'd see it. Sometimes you wouldn't. On board ship, in wartime conditions, you don't get much from anybody unless you're working in the quarters where the radar men and such are located and doing their job. We didn't always get the full account of things. We didn't have the Times or some other newspaper telling us what happened. Sometimes we've learned about things well after they occurred. In Okinawa, the south end has cliffs. People engaged in the fighting recognized that it was a losing cause. They'd head south, and they didn't want to be captured, so they'd take a jump off the cliffs and end it all. So that was a sad thing to hear, but it did happen. The Indianapolis looked gorgeous as we saw it pass because of recent maintenance and new paint. It stood out because of its repair. Melvin Pierce, my partner on the radar, was with me. We were out there and just left the radar equipment because the other team came on to take it over. And we were headed back down to our berth so we could get some sleep. Before that happened, there's some open space there. When we were in that open space, and that's when the ship came by. We looked at it. Well, it looks pleasant. You didn't make that association of what's to come. When we heard about it, it was a really nasty happening. The ship carried the bomb from California into Tinian. There are 2 islands up there, Saipan and Tinian. Tinian is the one that had the airport. They dropped off their box. I'm not sure what kind of a facility it was, but they dropped off some gear, and it was the A-bomb. The big one, I've forgotten the title exactly. The big boy, yeah. The big boy, and that was dropped by an airplane. And that ship carried it from California to Tinian, past each other in the channel. They were coming in, we were going out. We didn't know what an important part they had played. When they left Guam, they were supposed to head into the Philippine area. On their way, they were hit by a torpedo and quickly sunk. They were in the water for 4 days trying to attract attention and maybe be rescued. It took 4 days before a pilot noticed specks in the water and recognized the specks were men. He sounded the alarm. They were all over the place looking to recover these guys. That was a horrible experience for them. 4 days in the water, hanging onto a tube or something. Your neighbor might be next to you and all of a sudden gets hit by a shark and he's gone. Terrifying stuff. Form of support if you were going to survive a raft, a log, whatever they could hang on to until they were discovered. The Indianapolis had been in battle, hit and sent back for repair. After repair, they were available to transport that bomb. They took it to Tinian and delivered it, and the rest is history. The island had been the main focus, and the reason for that is it lies just to the south of Honshu, the main island. And it was obvious that what we wanted was a place that would be the jumping off point for attacking Honshu at some future date. And that's probably what they wanted our ship to be part of, no question about it. We would be right in the middle of that. There was a clear path to seeing the future would be an invasion of Japan. We were in two locations in Okinawa. One was Buckner Bay on the eastern shore. In Buckner Bay, there were about 50 ships. We had been at Ulithi before that. There were about another 50 ships in that area. When we first arrived out there on Okinawa, one of the first ships we heard about was the USS Pennsylvania, hit by a kamikaze, and about 8 or 10 or 12 people were killed in that blast. A couple of days later, another attack by the kamikaze, and there was a ship, the USS LaGrange, was berthed just a short distance from us. We could see it. I couldn't see it because I was down in the mess hall, but when the things were over, my peers came down, and Mel Pierce, who was one of my friends, he says, "Did you see that?" And I says, "No, I was down in the mess hall. I couldn't see it." So he explained what happened, that they had been hit by the kamikaze. Announced that there were about 20 casualties. That was the last kamikaze hit. And then after a couple of weeks there, we wound up taking a trip around the southern part of the island to the capital, Naha. At Naha, we picked up equipment for Guam. We didn't know what was going on at headquarters, but it was obvious, another indicator that the war was ending, that they just were being beaten back to where they came from. Because the war started, some of the penetrations that the Japanese made were all the way down to the Solomon Islands, and that's when the pushback started. The Allies got through the Solomons, the victor, and began to push other island groups. The Japanese could tell that they were going backwards, not forward. So when you're doing that, you're losing the war. The armaments were being located, and the future would be an invasion of Japan. We all seem to have that same point of view. We were going to win it, and we did. Mr. Truman became the president, and he had to make the decision to carry it out. He didn't hesitate. They dropped the bomb. This startled everybody, leveled everything near where the bomb dropped. It was huge and very damaging. Tens of thousands of people in each blast. You knew that was very punishing and difficult to survive. You quickly recognized there might be an end to the war. They gave a warning, waited a couple of days, and looked like they weren't going to do anything, waiting to see how they were going to react. And of course, the reaction was slow in coming, no response. So they dropped the second bomb, the Nagasaki bomb. That convinced the emperor the war had to end, and convinced them that fighting this type of armament would be an impossibility for the Japanese, so they surrendered. We never got really close to them. I don't think you would call us joyful, because we were still required to do what we had to do. That's the way it was, but no question about it. You breathed a sigh of relief to know that you were not going to be in the next invasion activity. The occupation of Japan. We were part of that group that went into Japan. Unfortunately, we were not there on the day of the signing of the end of hostilities. We were there for close to 5 months. Opportunities to get off the ship, wander through Tokyo. I got permission from our officers. They dropped me off and gave me the boundaries. When we were taking trips on shore, there was tremendous devastation of B-29 bombers and leveled everything. They had been weakened to the point where they couldn't do anything but end the war. The place was flattened out, and what you saw all over the place were military equipment going this direction, that direction, all over the place. A lot of activity, but no fighting. All I had to do to get a ride was stick my hand out with a thumb up saying I needed a lift. And these were military vehicles, so they'd stop. They said, "Where you going?" Or you'd tell them what you're doing, and look, that was our recreation. On one occasion, near the Emperor's Palace, I noticed that another building a short distance away, there was a group of people that were collecting down in there. I walked down to find out what that was all about and checked in with somebody and said, "See that car down there at the curbing?" He said, "That's General MacArthur's limousine. We think he's going to come out, so if you haven't seen him, stick around." I did. Short time later, the doors opened, the general came out, wandered out onto this patio, raised patio, and kind of like posed for pictures, so to speak, and then right back to business. Starts up again into the vehicle, and the vehicle takes off, and that's it. But it was General MacArthur. Quite a surprise to see him in the flesh. I was in town by myself, wandering around, checking things out. There were two teenage Japanese children came towards me, and they speak enough English to tell me that there was a gentleman in a small building, and they said he wanted to talk to me. And I took up the offer, went down to that building and went inside, sat on his mat, and had a conversation. It didn't last long, mostly because I wondered what the heck I was doing there. And he told me that he had, before the war, had been in San Francisco and enjoyed the US of A and such as that. So I was pleased to hear that, but I thought it was dangerous for me to be doing by myself. And I excused myself and headed down the road. I don't think he was much of a threat, but you never know. I don't recall any of us from my ship having trouble with the Japanese when we're given opportunities to go ashore and visit different locations. You were always treated well by the Japanese. They were good to people. There might have been a few incidents, but I don't think many. I did hear on the ship radio there had been a body removed from the water, an American sailor. I don't know what happened, but that would be the only indicator of a problem with the Japanese. I stayed in the Navy and had interesting experiences that went along with that. And of course, one of the most interesting was to prepare for the A-bomb test on Bikini Island. And our job was simply to, I think it was in Japan, we picked up a miniature submarine and had it in our well deck and carried that to Bikini. We were early, so we had a chance to go ashore. The guys on board taking that equipment off, they were doing their thing. We had some free time and had a chance to get on Bikini shores. I noticed 3 straw houses. I presume the Bikinians visited it, more likely. I don't think they lived in there. And what they did was leave the buildings there, but everything that might have been in there, fishing gear or whatever they used, and that was all empty. It was just an empty shell. The reason for that is if you want to continue your work on another atoll, you better get off and be in a hurry. On the beach, there was a seamen in the water with goggles and equipment that people use for such events. They're going in the water and see what's underneath. He allowed us to use his equipment. We checked it by just simply putting it on and taking a look down there to see down in the water. Beautiful schools of fish that were in that Bikini Island. It was remarkable, just lovely, just natural beauty of a group of fish, all different, and it's so lovely. But that was about it for us. We all just marveled at them. It's a time period where you're having difficulty coming back into your home environment and trying to pick up the pieces. It isn't easy. It takes a while to get back in the swing of things. By that time, we were ready to move forward. You're uncomfortable for some time until you reestablish friendships. It takes time. It's a period of loneliness. I got through it by going back to school and getting my high school degree. Then I signed up for college, graduated from Binghamton University, and got a master's degree. That was very valuable for everyone that had an opportunity to use it. I only got 3 years, but it was enough to get me started. I had to pay my own way. It was wonderful having it. Living through life, you start to think, what can you do better for yourself? You know, should have done better in school. I focused on that to help others. I was a science teacher at junior high. I enjoyed that very much. Then I went into a training program for the principalship and had to work as an assistant principal for a year and became a principal. So I enjoyed my career as a teacher and a principal. 68 years of that, we're going to stay together. She was a freshman and I was a senior. We just hit it off while we headed for the same type of existence, a good job and a good relationship. Fortunately, it all came out with my two daughters and two sons, wonderful people with their own family. Try to explain what I experienced. It was fascinating. Being in the service is like that, I guess, not only for me, but tons of people that have done the same thing or gone through the same service or type of existence. You are exposed to remarkable things that are occurring in the world, and if you're not directly involved with it, at least you maybe have seen it, and that's powerful. I wish some things were better when I started. Came out of a difficult situation growing up. That's life. You have to adapt. The results speak for themselves. Good health, by and large. All of us in the family have enjoyed reasonably good health, and that's key to good days. Just be persistent. Don't give up. It didn't work the first time. Try again. Keep plugging away. Some of the successes you start to enjoy are the payoff in terms of doing the right thing. I hope somebody can learn from this if they take the time to look at it.